Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Natalie here again from Retail NZ, and absolutely delighted to be with you once again as we talk today about operational recovery. And for most of you, you've been back trading again for a few weeks past lockdown and have experienced that initial surge. And some have actually reported starting to see that sort of a bit of a pullback again. So, thank you. Okay, there we go. Sorry, technical problems, as we often do. So, yeah, some of you, as I say, have had that initial surge that we got just sort of immediately post-lockdown, where, yeah, a lot of the parking areas of a lot of the shopping centres actually looked like it was pre-Christmas shopping. So today we really want to talk about, we've seen that upsurge, we've seen it pull back down again, and so what do we do to actually move into the future? What can we do to try and keep that momentum up or keep the ship afloat? So yeah, just a couple of things today. Please have a look on your screen. You'll see that there is a chat function. Really happy to take any questions which you may have, and we'll address those at the end. And even if there's ones there that it might be sort of difficult to address in this forum, more than happy to get back in touch with you after the webinar today, and we can have a chat about some specific things that you're dealing with in your business right now. So please, yeah, fire those questions through, and we will certainly attend to them later on this afternoon. So yeah, really the purpose of the webinar is to help our retailers take an objective look at their businesses in what's essentially a very difficult time right now. And we want to focus on some areas that can help you streamline and make some savings without harm to your business by compromising the skill set or the capacity of your staff or the product offering that you currently have in store. So I think here in New Zealand, you know, after lockdown, it was very obvious that there were very limited opportunities for businesses to operate. And I think what it did was it highlighted the extent of the unpreparedness of many businesses, and many of us were actually caught off guard. So really the recovery activities to resume, there are two things that we kind of need to achieve. The first one is we want to recover. And the second thing is that we really want to look at how do we safeguard our businesses into the future. So a good place to start is to actually audit the business activities and our costs. Where is the money going? We've got to look at where does the money flow and where can we make some of those costs without actually damaging our business at the same time. So some of the things we want to be having a look at is what's working well right now. And I'm sure there's some things that are working tremendously well in your business, but what are some of the other things that we can improve or change? And so really what we want to do is we want to be looking at a strategy, something that you can use to reduce your costs and increase your ROI or your return on investment. I think one of the things we learned from the economic fallout of COVID-19 is that most businesses had very limited cash flow when we were forced to shut down. And yes, I know building extra cash flow into your business can be very difficult in the short term, and I think particularly now. But it's never too late to just start putting away a bit of a rainy day fund. I happen to know somebody in a retail environment that for years of running his business had actually regularly been putting away in what he called his rainy day fund, and to my knowledge didn't even actually need to apply for wage subsidies for his team, kept everybody on, but actually paid them out of his own pocket. So obviously it's a well-established business, and that won't be the case for you if you're a newer business or starting out. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the sooner you actually start, you know, having a bit of a contingency plan, putting away some extra money on the side, the better for you in the long run. And I think the other thing just to remember as well is that we didn't see this coming, and who knows what lies around the corner. So the more prepared you can be and the quicker you can actually start getting prepared, the better. So really today I was just to focus on, we've got about 5 areas that we want to have a look at. And I mean, the goal of really of having a look at those things is to how do we improve our profitability. So some of those areas are, and I mean, they're very obvious, and I probably sort of had to think about them already. I know I've been working on the advice line 2 days a week here at Retail NZ as well. And most of the calls that actually come through is about restructuring and redundancies, which is really, really sad to hear that so many people are losing jobs. But at the same time, you know, there's the other side of that coin where we actually have seen where people have reduced their headcount, but then things have picked up again and they sort of, do we employ more people? We're struggling. So it's very uncertain times at the moment. So we're going to have a look and talk a little bit around staffing. We want to cover things like product range, your supplier contracts, what do we need to be thinking about in that space? And then the selling platforms, whether that's online or your storefront. What are some of the changes that you can make there that can cut your costs and increase your profitability as well? And then just some of the simple things like additional services and add-ons. What are some of those things that you can introduce or tweak maybe a little bit that can help you going forward? So let's start with first things first, and let's talk about staffing. I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted when I say to you that good staff can be really, really hard to find. At the start of 2020, retailers employed about 10% of the workforce across New Zealand, which amounted to about 209,000 individuals employed in the retail sector. And it's really expensive to, number one, get the right staff on board, and then secondly, to keep them on board. It's also really costly to lose staff, and those costs might not be obvious or apparent right at the get-go, but we'll talk a little bit about why I actually say that. So for most of you in your businesses, staffing will be one of one of your biggest outgoings every month or every fortnight, depending on how you're actually paying your team. And so when it comes to the crunch, that's very often one of the areas that retailers will actually look to save some costs over there. So I think we've got to always take it back down to the beginning. Forget what's going on now, but especially if you've been in a situation where you've had to let some staff go and now you're in a situation where you actually need to re-employ some staff. Even if that's the case, it's not the end of the world, because what it might actually be for you is an opportunity to really have a look at your recruiting practices. Poor recruitment and poor induction processes, they really can give you some complications down the line. And they can cost you a lot of time and a lot of money to actually rectify some of those situations. Not to mention the heartache and the stress that goes along with a lot of that as well. So a recommendation I would certainly give you is to say, invest in learning how to recruit well. Do your reference checks and your background checks often, and I've been in a situation where I recruited a lot of staff and somebody would just bowl me over in an interview situation, and I think, man, all my Christmases have come at once, and this is the perfect person that's just fallen into my lap today. And I go a little bit light on the reference checking. I can tell you that in my case, certainly, it almost always backfires, and I'm always sorry afterwards that I haven't really gone and dug around a little bit deeper than I intended to. I would say going on an interview is like going on a first date. We put on our best dress, we do our hair, we do our makeup, and we are the best selves that we can be. It's only as we get into that relationship that some of the little gremlins start to surface that we didn't pick up originally. So do your homework right at the get-go. It is time consuming, but you won't be sorry for it down the line. I'd say, and I know a lot of people don't like it, but see what you can find about people online as well. And you get a really good feel for whether somebody's actually going to be a good fit for your business or not. What are their interests and their passions? The last thing you want is to employ somebody that just wants a job for the money. Their values and their interests really do need to align with you and your organization. I mean, you know, just to give you a silly example, if you're selling sports gear, the last kind of person you want on board is a couch potato trying to sell the latest running shoe when they've never ever been out for a run themselves. So it's just that thing. Make sure that your staff are in line with you and your values and your offering as well. Really important to get that right. When you're planning what skills are needed in your business, it's a really good idea to think wide, think really broadly. Not everybody can do everything equally well, and neither should any of us be expected to do so. So have a good look at your team's collective strengths. You know, keep this in mind when you're recruiting people as well. Can you employ somebody that's actually going to fill some of those gaps up there? So you want to identify any opportunities for growth in your current team, or pick out any gaps that need filling. And it's always worth the investment that you make in training, any kind of training that will actually fill some of the gaps for you. There should always be a return on that sort of investment. A simple way to actually start to get some of that going as well is even just to learn a little bit more about, you know, personality profiling or skills profiling tools, like using a skills matrix. For example, skills are really important when you're looking at hiring a new team member, but sometimes that's almost less important than the personality and how that's going to fit in with the rest of the team and the culture that goes along with that as well. When we're thinking about profitability and our team, what a lot of business owners do, whether it's retail or other businesses, they like to introduce some kind of an incentive scheme, some kind of, you know, competition is good. And yes, competition is really good. However, a little warning bell with that, you need to be really, really careful about how you implement that. Incentive schemes in a team very often actually can have the opposite effect on some staff members and can actually be demotivating rather than motivating. And I think that plays out a lot, and it depends on how it's implemented and how it takes shape in a team, if I can put it that way. It can actually erode your culture, especially if it creates an environment where people are having to scramble for position or financial reward, you know, and it can tend to, in some cases, actually bring out the worst in people in terms of just dishonesty and sort of general nastiness. So you really want to get a good handle on the human dynamics of any incentive scheme and, you know, what that has the potential to cause in your team. Successful teams rather would work to motivate and encourage one another. So you're looking for more of a win-win kind of a scheme or a plan that you put in place. You're looking for synergy more than you are competition. So it's that old adage of when the tide rises, all the boats rise. So if you can think of that instead of a more kind of a dog-eat-dog situation that we often see when there is an incentive scheme in an organisation as well. Yeah, so you don't want the process that you've set in place to actually create more sales and actually get people motivated to self-destruct. So just always happy to talk through if you've got something in mind or you've got something maybe it's not working very well, always happy. Give us a call on the advice line, always happy to talk through that and make some suggestions and recommendations to you as well. I think what's really important with your team as well is if you can identify each person's individual strengths and skills and allow individuals to operate within those parameters. That sets everybody up for success, because if I'm working from my strengths, then it allows me to be good at what I do. And so if I'm good at what I do, I will enjoy what I do. And the more I enjoy what I do, the more likely I am to do better at it, of course. And when you set up an environment where individuals can be really successful, that cannot help but overflow into your business and actually increase your bottom line as well. So I know I'm spending quite a bit of time talking about staff, but I think we've all heard that old adage of, you know, staff is your greatest asset. And they can be, but they can also be a downfall if you do not create an environment or allow an environment to be created where everybody can actually thrive and survive in there. So, but that brings us back to the idea of the cost of wages, which tends to be in the top 3 expenses for most retailers. And we're continuing to see that go skywards. You know, we've got minimum wages that are continuing to increase all the time. And I mean, that's only one of your cost pressures that you're looking at. So it is, when we're having to, in difficult times, it probably is one of the first areas that employers will go and have a look at. So some of the things you can consider around there, no doubt you have already, but some of the things to consider are things like planning rosters. You know, look at the key drivers there, ensuring that you have enough staff during those peak trading times, and building some, I really think it's important to build some flexibility into your contracts as well, that you can sort of, if you do a good evaluation of knowing, you know, which are your busy times during a day, which are your busy days, so that you don't have a lot of staff rostered on when there's nothing to do, because that will just continually eat into your profits as well. I think most retail environments are employing part-time people, so have a look, can there be some flexibility around those hours and the times that people are actually working as well. Obviously, this is going to vary from business to business. It's going to be dependent on your location, your type of business, and the products that you sell as well. You know, and just to give you an example there, for example, if most of your product is moved through your online platform, you won't necessarily have foot traffic at peak times, or like your lunchtime peak hours, like a say a bricks and mortar store in the CBD will have. So it's about working out when your busy times are and having the staff to cover that. And you know, use all the tools you have at your disposal. If you don't have that information at your fingertips, spend some time. You know, do a head count and do that over a couple of weeks to see, you know, when it's, you know, what are the busy times, or what are your most busy days. To get a handle on the trends is very valuable information as to then how you can apply that to your rosters. And sometimes what you think you see, when reality, when you put it into practice, might look a little bit different. So you just want to speak to staff and ensure that you've got the flexibility in there that you need. And if you've got new staff coming on board, think about your contracts, build some flex into the hours that they work as well. Obviously, we don't do 0-hour contracts, but if you can leave it a little bit fluid in there, to say that, you know, you can move those times around, might be a really good way for you to look after the employee so that they know what is expected, but at the same time, it looks after your business in that way as well. The other thing with that is, you don't want to have all your staff on all the time, because invariably you get the call in the morning that someone is sick or something has come up and somebody can't come to work. So to build in that additional capacity to cover some of those unforeseen things that do happen from day to day as well. So when it comes to reducing your hours or your head count, there can be some real pros and cons around that, but this is not an area where you should just, you know, go in and do the whole slash and burn thing. The slash and burn thing is very seldom the right path. We've taken some calls here where people have drastically said, cutting 50% of our staff complement, only to have to then renege and go back on that because they realise that keeping the operation on, they just don't have the capacity in the staff that they've decided to keep on to actually reach those goals that they have set for themselves. So go cautiously here is essentially what I'm saying. If you do need to reduce hours and that going to look different from your contracts, just be sure that you follow the proper consultation process. We've done a whole webinar on this, but just a good reminder, because we're still getting quite a lot of calls in the space as well. So, and if you've got some specific questions, phone us. We've got some processes and things, some sort of high-level processes that you can follow, right down to templates and things that you can use. So do, if you remember, give us a call. We're more than happy to share those with you. You may need to evaluate each role and see where you can reduce, but when you've got several people in the same or very similar roles, really your first prize would be, and it's Obviously, it's going to depend on your organisation, but if you can, first prize is really to reduce everyone's hours across the board by a percentage. That keeps it very fair, and it does a whole lot of other things as well. Number one, it keeps more people in work. It's that whole idea of, the half loaf of bread is better than no bread at all. What it does for you as a business owner is it retains a much wider skill set for you to tap into as a resource. So the more people, as I said earlier, if you've planned your team really well, you're going to have a very wide range of skill sets across that team. So now you get to retain that, and you can get to pick and choose from that as you need it. It allows more flexibility. I've mentioned, if you need cover for somebody that's suddenly taken ill, you've usually got a few more resources and you're not scrambling to work out how you're going to cover shifts. It also protects the investment that you've made. I spoke earlier about the huge cost in recruitment and training. You don't want all of that just to go up in smoke because you've let half the team go. So if you can keep that there, and be able to, as a business, still draw on some of those resources that you've put money into, that puts you actually in a stronger position. That's not to say that if you reduce hours, people aren't going to seek work elsewhere. But in the meantime, it covers them and it covers you. So my philosophy is always look for win-win situations in any situation. Lastly, what it does is it promotes a good culture. It creates that we're all in this together culture, and it prevents an erosion of staff morale. We see this time and time again where sort of half the team, as their positions have been made redundant, and the remaining staff, the productivity actually has a tendency to go down the tubes because suddenly their world is rocked, there's uncertainty, they might not like the way they perceive that their colleagues have been treated, and it can be quite destructive as well. So the more people you can keep on board in your organisation, the better. The thing is, you can always increase people's hours later on when business picks up again. So it mitigates not only the recruitment and training costs, but also those, if you've got to get new people on board, you've got to think again. New people make mistakes. That's very costly. And new people, often their productivity is much lower as they're learning the job as well, and they can be a bit of a disruption to your longer term staff as well, as they constantly need to ask questions or be trained on the job as well. So try and keep as many of your good people on board as possible, because that'll give you long-term savings as well. And all of this is about balance. It's the balance between looking after your business and the finances, but it's also about looking after your staff members and the investment that you've made in them. Disgruntled staff members, they seldom deliver a good return on the investment that you've made in them, irrespective of how much that was or how good that was. If people become disgruntled, they can quickly turn and become disloyal or dishonest, even vindictive, badmouth your organisation, and they're actually likely to cost you more than the money that you end up saving in cutting them off or making some of those other changes in your business. So all I'm saying is be really careful, be very humane in how you bring these changes about. Weigh up your options before you make a final decision on what it is you're going to do. You always have to put out a proposal. So if you're wanting to change people's hours, put out a proposal, tell your team that you'll revisit it or review it later on an ongoing basis, and be sure to do that. Check in with people regularly, share as much information with them as you can. The sales figures are up, or the sales figures haven't picked up as much as we'd hoped. Keep people in the loop. The more you communicate with your team, the better they are going to be at understanding your situation, and the more likely they'll be at supporting you through this as well. Yeah, and another question is always, when you do make some changes in your business as well, put everything in writing. Don't just send people an email. Give people a letter, ask them to sign it, and keep that on file, because if something does go wrong down the line, you don't just want to be relying on an email. Their signature on a piece of paper signifies their agreement to whatever it is that has been proposed. If you've got one or more people on your team that do not agree with your proposal and do not want to go ahead with it, then unfortunately you probably find yourself in a situation where you may have to consider restructuring as a next logical step in your process. All right, so that's enough about staffing, but I just wanted to give it the importance, the time that it deserves, because it's probably one of your most important areas of your business where you can look at saving costs, but how you do that can either make or break what it is that you're trying to do. The next area we want to have a look at really is your product range. You will know by now that consumer behavior and consumer mindset has changed since the whole COVID-19 hit us. Most of us, probably yourself, I know I certainly have been through this experience for myself, we're looking at the world around us and we're actually asking some hard questions. So for you as a retailer, this is a fabulous time for you to kind of review your product offering and make sure that the products that you offer actually align with your own brand, number one, but also, and probably more importantly, with this changed customer mindset. People's values have changed, and so you need to be thinking about that when you think about the product that you're offering. And besides COVID-19, this is probably something you should be doing on a regular, ongoing basis anyway. So it doesn't have to be complicated. This can be very simple. If you look at like your sales data or your profit margins across your individual products, and as you redevelop your business strategy, you want to include a plan that outlines your product categories. I'm sure most of you have got this taped anyway, but if you don't, have a look at what are your product categories, what is their expected shelf life, what are your key volume lines or your KVLs. Those are those staple good sellers that have the decent product margins, and they just tick over, they tick out the door every week, every month, and they make you a nice profit. Know what those are and see how you can maximize on those as well. Also, this is a good time probably to review the quality and the price of everything that you sell, so that you can have the confidence that your products reflect your brand as well. Because everything you put out there kind of reflects on you as well. So if you're selling a more up-end product, make sure that it actually does what it says it does. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about product categories, your KVLs, and shelf life. So good practice to have a range of product categories that really complement one another. And I'm sure most of you do that anyway, but if there's, sometimes we want to offer everything to everyone. So now's the time to kind of streamline. Make sure, if it's clothing that you sell, that pieces work well together, and that things actually complement one another. If it's women's wear, for example, a good complementary category is things like handbags and shoes, for example. So no matter what business you're in, there will be a range of categories for you to evaluate. And so then you want to evaluate the individual products in each of those categories as well. So when I'm talking about an audit, I mean a good thorough scrubbing of everything, getting all your ducks in a row, knowing exactly what your product offering is, what are the categories, and then in each of those categories, what are the products, and having a look at how each and every one of those performs. So it's pretty simple, but it can be a little bit of work, but it's very, very worthwhile doing. So the best way to do that, best way to simplify that process is to have a look at your top performers first, and you will know what your top performers are. Take those, put them to the side, and leave them for last, because actually they're the least of your problems. You really want to be looking at the other categories that maybe aren't your best sellers. What are your lowest sales turnovers? Which are the ones that are not making good turnover for you? And those are the ones that you're going to have a review of first. So in order to do that, and in order to, what is your thinking in that space, you've got to ask a couple of really some good critical thinking questions, like, does this product category still sell? How well does it sell? The obvious questions like, is my pricing right on it? You know, you've got to think about it. Is somebody else offering the same thing? Can I get it cheaper somewhere else? Is it value for money? Your New Zealand retailer, the number one thing, and they're interested in a lot of things and sustainability and green retailing and all that comes in there, but it's got to still be affordable. So asking price questions is really, really important. Other things you can ask are, what are the profit margins on this? Is there a quality issue? Is this product easy to market or advertise, to cross-sell? How much stock do I have? You know, does this product cost me more money than it makes me? And as you work through this, you'll get some clarity on which product categories to keep and which to eliminate. And this is an area, I said to you before, when it comes to looking at your head count of your staff, you don't just want to go in and slash and burn. But this is certainly one where you can go in and if you get a picture of what's going on there, slash and burn, get rid of the stuff that's taking up space and not making you any money. When it comes to your KVLs, you always want to have some good consistent stock levels of those, your best sellers, your bread and butter items. And those products are normally very good ones that you can cross-sell with other products that you're trying to push out your door as well. So have a brainstorm, talk to your team, which things go hand in hand, and come up with a strategy as to how you can move them out in pairs out of the door. It's that age-old question of, you know, do you want fries with that? Just to give you an idea, and this is an area I'm a little bit passionate about, only because I've seen it really work when I was doing retail sales, and one of the retail jobs I had was actually selling beds. And we used to have mattress protectors that would sit on a shelf and would have a layer of dust, I kid you not, this thick on it. We were always cleaning the dust off the stuff. And one day, one of the reps for the product that we stocked came in and kind of said, just, you know, notice you guys don't order much of this stuff. What is the problem? And we kind of went, oh, well, nobody really buys them, you know, unless they've got little kids that are wetting the bed, nobody seems to think they're important. Then we got an education. It's not about wetting the bed at all, I discovered. It's actually about dust mites. So dust mites are a living organism that actually their main food source is dead skin cells. So if you think about sleeping in a bed at night, they're living inside your mattress because with nothing protecting or nothing, no barrier between your skin cells, which are naturally falling off you every day anyway, that's their food source. So they can actually eat as much of that as they like. You will know that what goes in the top's got to come out somewhere else, so it's got to be excreted somewhere, and that is what makes it so unhealthy. When I knew that very day, I got mattress protectors for my bed at home, and I don't think I ever sold another mattress without pushing a mattress protector. But it wasn't even a pushy sale. It was when I was educated enough to be able to give that information to my customer. It just made perfect sense. Virtually nobody left the store without a mattress protector under their arm. So again, this is where education and training comes into it. Make sure that you get the reps from your suppliers to come and educate your staff on it, or if you know something about it yourself, spend that time training your team. It will always pay off. If they know why they're selling something, they'll be a whole lot more enthusiastic and optimistic about selling it as well. Something else to consider is shelf life. The longer something sits in your stock room or on the shelf unsold, the more it will cost you. You know, think of it in terms of paying rent. If I just occupy a house and I never ever pay the rent on it, I become a squatter. If your product is sitting on your shelf and it's not turning over and it's not bringing in money for you to pay your rent, then it is essentially a squatter. So it ties up money that you could actually be using elsewhere. So this is a time, as I say, slash and burn, get rid of the stuff that isn't selling. And we know that not all products have a really quick turnaround time, but it is really important to identify what is a reasonable turnover time for each category. And as I say, if you can learn something new about a product that's just sitting there, like I did with the mattress protectors, you know, we were ordering new mattress protectors every week after that because we were just selling so many. So don't underestimate the value of that as well. you know, you want to think about, this is a good time as well for you to look at opportunities to reduce your costs across your supply chain. Consider where it's possible to renegotiate your supplier contracts. I think often this is an area where we just kind of get into a rut and we always buy the same product from the same supplier. And there's a safety and there's a comfort in that, and particularly if it's a good supplier and we know that they are going to supply on time. Sometimes we never question their price increases or to see if we can actually get that somewhere else. So again, this is one of those areas where you want to weigh up, can I get it cheaper somewhere else? Or is that too risky that a new supplier might not be able to deliver products? Because if you don't have product, then you're not making money either. So be thinking about, be having those conversations with your suppliers, and also be asking the question, you know, can I have more than one supplier for a particular product? Bringing a bit of diversity in there can be a good thing for your business as well. Another thing to think about when it comes to supply chains, educate your team on how your supply chain works. The more they know about that, and the more they can actually be part of that process and can actually be more useful to you in that space. You don't have to carry everything yourself. Get people involved. You'll be surprised at some of the wisdom that can come out of the team. Again, I say that if you've recruited the right people, they'll be a tremendous asset to you and not just sit around and expect you to make some of those difficult decisions. They can have some real valuable input into that as well. I suppose when it comes to this area, the margins in retail are paper thin. So any fat that you can build into the mix, the better. So have a look at who's your suppliers. I know a lot of suppliers are struggling at the moment with getting product. So even from that perspective, it might not be the worst thing to have an additional or an alternate supplier as well. And don't be afraid to negotiate. You know, if your supplier values you as a reseller of their product, and they know that you're starting to ask some of those pointy end questions, they're probably more than likely to work with you and to meet you somewhere in that negotiation. Next area to be thinking about is storefronts and selling platforms. I think if there's one thing that COVID-19 has taught us, is the importance of diversifying. We've just spoken about diversifying your product offering, diversifying maybe even your suppliers of those products, but something else you need to think about in this space is about diversifying your selling platforms. This is especially true for retailers who were not set up at the beginning of the lockdown, for example, to take those phone orders, or who had an online platform. This is a trend that, and I think we've become so used to this, we do so, you know, so many fewer face-to-face things. We've all become used to doing certain things online. And so we have seen this surge in online trading. And I have a feeling that that is a trend that is here to stay. So make sure that you're absolutely 100% set up for that going forward. And, you know, even at this stage, if your business only operates in a bricks and mortar environment, this is really a good call for you to review your digital presence and your sales platforms right now. So speaking of bricks and mortar, if you do still operate most of you will still operate a physical storefront, you know, chances are that rent is one of your largest expenses. I know there's been some disappointment about what the government has set in place. There is some stuff that they have done. I don't know if it's delivered the immediate relief that a lot of business owners were hoping for. But, you know, there's other ways to reduce costs as well. One of the things that we're seeing many people do is actually changing locations. If you can find more affordable space close by, then by all means do that. But before you do that, it always helps to know, I've said negotiate with your suppliers. Well, your landlord is a supplier as well. Go and have a conversation. I know a lot of landlords have been very sticky about this and haven't actually wanted to budge on that. I've heard a lot of people have rung us with that as a complaint. And but that you've got to think of it or the landlord really should think of it in terms of, if you move out of that space, I don't think that people are clamoring to move into retail space right now. Certainly not the top end stuff. It is too expensive for businesses struggling. So if you've got a reasonable landlord, certainly a good time to go and be having those conversations. Moving certainly is an option, but it's expensive to move and it's very inconvenient as well. So be having those conversations. And I think the thing is, there's going to be a lot of empty retail space going forward. So if your landlord is smart, he'd rather have you in there, particularly if you're a good paying tenant, rather than having it sit empty for 6 months to a year. He's going to lose a lot more that way than actually having you in it, and the place isn't going to go to wreck and ruin either, because places do tend to deteriorate when there's no one in them. So if you really do find yourself in a tough position, particularly in this regard, build that retail, that online retail presence as well. Make that a focus, even if it means you're preparing to close down your bricks and mortar. So think of it in terms of a transition. Build that online presence as you think of scaling back on your bricks and mortar store as well. And, you know, even if you do decide, even if you are thinking right now, well, maybe I'll close the store down at the moment, if you've got a strong online presence going forward, you know, that can give you some great momentum if at a later stage you decide you do want to reopen a physical store as well. Now, if you've got this following online, hey, we're opening a new retail store, people are very likely to come in, because people still like that tactile, that tangible experience. So I think even going forward, there will be a place for both. But the question is right now is, how do you juggle that? How do you negotiate that going forward? If you own your own building as well, or if you're stuck in a bit of a long-term lease, another thing to do is to think of the fit out. Make sure that you're maximizing the space so that you can actually return the highest profit. You know, this might be a time to spend a little bit of money on, you know, upgrading some of that fit out over there. Because even though this might cost you a little bit of money up front, it can really increase your profit margins in the long run by improving that customer journey. Having an exciting and appealing place to visit can really attract people through your door as well. That, combined with really marketing what you're doing in that space, in an online social media space, together with an e-commerce platform, can be a very powerful trio of helping you to get that business up and running where you need it to be as well. Again, if you own your premises, or even if you are in a lease, investigate the possibility of subleasing your space. You know, this could certainly further reduce your costs, especially if you downscale your operation for the time being. Don't want to be paying for all of that space if you're only going to be using part of it. That brings us onto the digital selling platforms. I don't want to go into this too much, because really it's a whole workshop or a whole webinar all by itself, and we've certainly done some of those as well. So if you want to revisit that, all of the webinars that we've done to date are actually sitting up on our website. So go and have a look around. If you struggle to find them, give us a call on the advice line. We'll send you a link to those as well. But I suppose the bottom line here is that if you weren't online at the start of 2020, we really hope by now that you've seen the importance of that and have done something to increase your digital presence there. And if this is, you know, something that you struggle with, we do offer some training opportunities in that space, and there are other organisations that can even come along and do that for you if it's really something that's completely out of your comfort zone. Lastly, I'll just talk about, you know, services and add-ons and how powerful they can be. Often say, oh, you know, do the upsell or whatever, but I'll give you a bit of an example as well about just how powerful that can be, and it's something I'm a little bit interested in, but it's my downfall really as a consumer, because I end up spending a whole lot more money than what I prefer to. But really the question here that you need to be asking yourself is what is your unique offering, and how is it different from things that other people are offering out there or trying to sell out there? This for me really is about looking for opportunities to create additional revenue streams. If your only revenue stream is the foot traffic that's coming through your door, you probably are in a bit of a dangerous situation. So you've got to look at diversifying this as well. You've got to know your market. So I'll just give you an example. I've recently got into some upcycling, and there's a chalk paint that I have discovered. And when I first saw their retail, their bricks and mortar, I went in. They had some really lovely pieces in the shop that they had, but I wasn't ready to buy quite at that time. I went and I looked them up online, and I was so impressed to find that they had this whole raft of YouTube videos, and they were generous in what they shared on the YouTube videos. So what the YouTube videos have done for me is, number one, they have inspired me. They have the most amazing just projects on there that give people ideas as to what actually can be done with their product. And then they do the how-to. They show you step by step how to work through this process, how to use the product, and all of the rest of it. But the kicker is they tell you what you need. And so they won't just tell you you need this paint. It'll be this paint and this brush and this primer and this wax. And the next thing I know, I've ordered 4 or 5 products online, because they're not just saying, oh, this is what we do. They're actually teaching me, they're training me how to do it. There's problem shooting stuff that goes on there, and I end up buying a heck of a lot of stuff that probably sometimes I wonder if I actually need it, but they show me how it works together. So the challenge to you is what does this look like in your business? Do you do homewares? As part of that, doing those YouTube videos to kind of show how the pieces work really well together in a room, for example. And people love watching videos anyway, so it's not just about what's on your e-commerce platform, but actually retail customers often can see individual items, but they don't really know how to put them together. If you're working in a clothing store, for example, and I know because I've done this myself before, somebody came in, I would try and put an outfit together for them so that they weren't just coming in to buy a skirt or a blouse. I would try and actually send them out there with the skirt, the blouse, the shoes, the jacket, and a necklace, and possibly a handbag as well. And they walked out, I've done all the hard work for them. They didn't have to go home and figure out how it was going to work with all the other bits and pieces. Somebody actually did that work for them. So that can be a really successful sales tactic. It's not always going to work, and sometimes people are quite specific and they know what they want. But you always need to be thinking about, how can I sell more of my product? And the way to do that is to figure out how my products work really well together. Yeah, as I've said, you know, the DIY videos, if you, for example, you've got a hardware store, great platform to show people how to do things. There's hundreds of ways that you can add additional services or add-on benefits, and make sure that your bricks and mortar, your e-commerce, and any sort of social media and any other platforms that you're using are working well together, because the one thing really can lead to another. And if you, the more you can keep people engaged, the more they're likely to either seek out your bricks and mortar or just buy from you online as well, if you've done a really good job of showing them how the products work together. How you add value can really determine whether you're actually going to return a profit on the things that you sell. But again, training for your staff, because if your staff don't know how the puzzle pieces fit together, they're going to have a very hard time you know, getting that through to your client base, to your customer base. And something really important to remember in this space is, don't be flogging a dead horse. If your business already has things like this that are not working that well, you know, cut them, try something new. Don't, you know, it's that old thing of, you can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. The bottom line is that you are looking to minimize the elements of your business that cost you money, while maximizing those aspects that you can, and that will actually give you that return. So I suppose the question is where from here? We know that we can't go on doing the same thing and expecting a different result. I think that is the definition of vanity. So this is really an invitation or a challenge really to take a fresh look at your offering. Consider what your new consumer wants and how your business can supply that, because it is different out there. People have come through the lockdown very different beasts. So you really need to be brainstorming and thinking about how this can actually work for you going forward. So just as we come to this now, I just want to see if we have any questions up here. Let's just see if we've got anything there. Here we are. So let's have a look at this. Let me just get that out of the way. Here's a question here. Do you have some pointers on what is important to consumers now and how we can shape our offering to meet that? We've probably covered a little bit of that right now, but it's a great question and great for us to kind of sum that up really, I suppose. Product is always going to be your starting point. Make sure that the product that you're offering is right for this new mindset. The thing that people are looking for right now, Kiwi consumers are still very much price orientated, and they do certainly look at the price of things. That is an important factor for people. But more importantly, and we're seeing more and more, people are keen to know, is it a New Zealand owned business? Is it made in New Zealand? Is it recyclable? What goes into it? Particularly around animal products, for example, people want to know that there's those ethical practices in place. I was looking at some research this morning, and I will tell you where I found that. It said that about 71% of New Zealanders are actually researching companies' sustainability practices before actually deciding to make a purchase from them. So this whole idea of sustainability has actually seems to have ramped up, I think, anyway, since COVID, and that's got a lot to do with it. I don't know if a lot of you probably saw some wonderful videos and photographs of how nature just kind of started regenerating itself the minute we were all actually in lockdown. And that's kind of shown people that we can help the planet recover as well. So what this is it's coming back to our values. Your customers are wanting to know your values, so make sure that your staff actually share those values as well and can be promoting and telling that same story. And like I said, the couch potato that's trying to sell me the latest most expensive pair of running shoes, I'm going to see through that very quickly, because if they can't tell me that experience of that or why it's important to them, I'm probably not going to buy the story, and it's going to be a very thin veneer for them. So really important, know what your values are, communicate them, and it's not enough anymore just to have our values up on our walls. We must be living them, so we must be showing that to our customer in the products that we source or the products that we are actually selling to them. So if you are interested, there's a great study, it's a survey actually, not really a study, done by a company called Rutherford, and it's, if you Google COVID-19 Love Local survey, you can actually see that the results of that survey is actually up online, and you can see exactly what's important to the New Zealand consumer right now. So very, very interesting reading. All right, here's another one. What are the actionable steps for ensuring a strong e-commerce presence? I think really that is a lot to do with extending your reach via social media. I've spoken about how all of these things interconnect with one another, and I'm going to say it's time consuming to do all this sort of thing, but it's very well worth it. And if you start seeing the results from those efforts later on down the line, it might actually be that it's worth your while to actually employ somebody to manage all the social media and making sure that all of that digital stuff is integrated for you. Social media really helps you build relationship with your customer base. You must know your customer base, and creating a relationship with them means knowing what it is that they want. So social media really gets that interest for you as well. And other things to consider is making sure that your website navigation is as intuitive as possible. Make the customer journey and customer experience really easy. Another thing to think of is like your Google your search engine optimization. Make it as searchable as possible. So there is a way to do that. There are people that can help you. We run workshops on that as well. But for some people, I've seen they come along to the workshops and they go, oh yeah, this is kind of above and beyond what I want to do. I want to focus on, you know, my business and my product offering. It is always worth your while to invest in getting somebody to do that sort of for you if it is just not in your field of interest to do. I spoke earlier about, you know, get people to work within their strengths. If this isn't a strength of yours, you will hate it. So it's always worth paying somebody whose strength it is to come along and get involved and do that for you. So just something to think about over here. All right, we've got one more over here that I'll take. What are the aspects that usually contribute to the most ROI, return of investment? What avenues earn the most money, and how would you measure or view this data? Yeah, really, really good question. Again, I think this is talking more about, you know, what are the aspects, how do you actually conduct this audit of your own business? And I think a really good place to start, and if you don't already, it's about having a really good handle on your business, especially when it comes to your product offering. So it comes back to the importance of really asking some of those hard questions. And this is going to very much depend on the quality of the data that you have at hand. Now, a good point of sale system should be able to help you to increase your profitability by giving you some key metrics. Those key metrics can really help you to make some better decisions for your business, you know, including like sales, your inventory levels, your sell-through rates, or that product turnover, for example, what your margins are. You know, if you're selling very little of a product where the margin is very low, you've got to be asking the question, is it worth my while to actually keep this product on my shelf? So to give you a broad answer, I think the answer is it depends. It depends on what you're selling, how much of it you've got. But go back to those basic things. Know what your product margins are, know what moves quickly through your store, and work out what other products are really going to complement those, and educate your team. How do you sell these things together? You know, if somebody's buying a really expensive pair of leather shoes from you, an easy sell is, hey, you've paid $500 for that pair of boots. What you really need is this fantastic leather care product, because actually you've made an investment in these shoes, and this is actually just going to give you a greater return on the investment of this purchase that you've made. It's like the same thing with the dust mites in the mattress. Believe me, once you get that picture in your head, nobody wants to leave that store without, you know, that mattress protector under their arm. It's also really important to have a look at the performance of each of your products and use that to decide as to, you know, whether that actually stays or goes. All right, so that does appear. Let me just double check. We've got no additional questions that have come in there. No, looks like we've covered most of the things we wanted to talk about here, and I think most of it, to be fair, is pretty self-explanatory, but sometimes it's just a good reminder to go back to basics, stick to your knitting. You know, sometimes just taking a step back, reevaluating where you are, can really actually be the thing that gives you that leverage to move you forward. Strip everything back, and without starting again, start again. So I'd really just invite you once again, if you are a member, please call us on the advice line. We're really happy to talk through any specifics to your particular situation. Our email address is advice@retail.kiwi. Our 0800 number is 0800 472 472. And that's about it from me. Thank you for being with us this afternoon, and I wish you all of the best and look forward to walking alongside you as you basically continue on this road to recovery. So thank you very much for your attention today.